The darkness of space pressed against the hull of the interstellar escape pod as Kira Langley clutched a battered console. She was the last living human, adrift in the infinite void, and every beat of her heart was a defiance against extinction. The pod's AI crackled to life. Proximity alert. Unidentified vessel detected. Hostile classification, 85% probability. Kira's breath hitched. The faint outline of a sleek alien craft shimmered into view through the viewport. Its surface pulsed with a bioluminescent glow, its shape sinuous like a predator in the hunt. She quickly strapped herself into the pilot's seat, hands dancing over the controls. AI, evasive maneuver protocol, now. The pod's thrusters roared, but the alien ship matched every move with predatory precision. The interior lights flickered as a plasma bolt grazed the pod's side, sending it into a spiral. Kira gritted her teeth, fighting the controls to stabilize the pod. Damage report, she shouted. Minor hull breach. Navigation system compromised. Primary defense systems offline. She slammed a fist against the console. She couldn't afford to be captured, not when she was humanity's last hope. The cryopod in the rear of the ship carried the DNA archives of every human survivor. If the aliens got to it, humanity's legacy would vanish forever. The alien craft fired again, narrowly missing the pod. Kira yanked the throttle, veering sharply toward a nearby asteroid field. It was a desperate gamble, but the dense cluster of space rocks might give her an edge. The pod weaved between tumbling boulders, each one spinning like a death trap. Sweat dripped down her temple as the alien ship pursued her, its plasma bolts carving glowing streaks into the darkness. One bolt struck an asteroid just ahead, sending a hailstorm of debris toward her. Brace for impact, the AI warned. Kira's pod shuddered violently as fragments ricocheted off its hull. Warning lights flashed across the console, but she didn't slow. Instead, she aimed for the densest part of the field, where the larger asteroids moved sluggishly, like sleeping giants. She had one chance. Deploy EMP charge on my mark. Acknowledged. Charging capacitor. The alien ship closed in, its weapons charging for a final shot. Kira clenched her fists around the controls, her pulse thundering in her ears. At the last second, she dove the pod beneath a massive asteroid and barked the command. Now! A brilliant surge of blue light erupted from the pod, rippling through the asteroid field. The alien craft convulsed, its bioluminescent surface flickering erratically. For a moment, it hung in space, disabled. But Kira had no time to celebrate. Her pod systems were also fried. The console sputtered, and the thrusters flickered out. She was dead in the water, floating amidst the silent chaos of the asteroids. Her heart sank as she realized the alien ship was already recovering, its systems rebooting faster than she anticipated. AI, estimate time to full alien system restoration. 27 seconds. She had less than half a minute to figure out an escape or face certain death. Her gaze darted to the cryopod behind her. If she couldn't save herself, she could at least secure humanity's legacy. Emergency eject the DNA archive, she ordered. The AI hesitated. This action will leave the archive exposed to extreme conditions. Do it. With a hiss of decompression, the cryopod launched from the ship, its thrusters activating a pre-programmed trajectory toward a distant star system. Relief washed over her for a fleeting second, but the alien ship had fully recovered, its weapons charging anew. Kira unbuckled herself and sprinted toward the emergency airlock. She grabbed a plasma cutter and a compact explosive pack from the supply locker, her mind racing. If she couldn't outrun them, she'd have to outthink them. The airlock's outer door opened with a hiss, revealing the alien craft looming ominously. She magnetized her boots to the pod's exterior and began her climb, the explosive clutched tightly in one hand. The alien ship was close enough now that she could see its weapon ports glowing with impending fire. "You want me? Come and get me," she muttered, her voice a mixture of fear and defiance. As the alien ship moved in for the kill, she hurled the explosive toward its hull. The device latched onto its surface with a satisfying clink. She scrambled back into the airlock, slamming her hand on the emergency pressurization switch just as the explosion detonated. The shockwave tore through space, sending both her pod and the alien craft spinning. The viewport cracked under the strain, and warning alarms blared throughout the cabin. Kira crawled back to the pilot's seat, panting and blooded. The alien ship was still functional, though its movements were erratic. Kira's heart sank. The explosion hadn't been enough to destroy it, but it had bought her a sliver of time. AI, divert all remaining power to long-range propulsion, she said through gritted teeth. Power insufficient for sustained travel. She tightened her grip on the controls. I don't care. Burn everything we've got. The pod's thrusters flared weakly, propelling her toward the edge of the asteroid field. Behind her, the alien ship gave chase, limping but relentless. Kira's vision blurred from exhaustion, but she refused to give up. Humanity's survival depended on her. Suddenly, the pod's sensors lit up with a new alert. A massive gravitational anomaly loomed ahead, a black hole, its event horizon shimmering with deadly beauty. Kira's breath caught in her throat. AI, trajectory analysis. Can we slingshot around it? The AI hesitated. High probability of catastrophic failure. She stared at the approaching singularity, her mind racing. The alien ship was closing in, its weapons charging for a final strike. If she didn't act now, there would be no escape. Do it, she whispered. The pod's thrusters roared to life, propelling her straight toward the black hole. The gravitational pull threatened to tear the ship apart, but Kira held her course, her eyes fixed on the faint glimmer of escape on the other side. The alien ship followed, its sleek form contorting as it neared the event horizon. Kira's pod groaned under the strain, the viewport fracturing further. Just as the black hole's pull seemed insurmountable, she executed a desperate maneuver, angling the pod into a narrow escape trajectory. The alien ship wasn't so lucky. Its damaged systems faltered, and it spiraled into the abyss, disappearing in a flash of light. Kira's pod emerged on the other side, battered but intact. She collapsed into her seat, gasping for air. For a moment, there was only silence, the vast, empty expanse of space stretching out before her. Then the AI spoke, its tone calm but grave. Warning, life support systems critical. Estimated survival time, 72 hours. Kira closed her eyes, exhaustion washing over her. She had won the battle, but the war for humanity's survival was far from over. Alone in the void, she clung to the fragile hope that the cryopod would reach its destination, and that she wouldn't be the last living human for long. The cryopod carrying humanity's legacy drifted through the void, its automated thrusters steering it toward a distant star system. Kira's escape pod followed at a sluggish pace, its systems barely holding together. She leaned back in the pilot's seat, her body trembling from exhaustion and adrenaline. She was alive, but survival felt like a cruel joke. AI, she said hoarsely, status on cryopod trajectory. Cryopod remains on course to System 12B ETA, 22 days at current velocity. 22 days. Kira's pod wouldn't last that long. Her systems were failing, oxygen reserves dwindling, power systems shorting out. And while she had escaped the alien ship, she hadn't escaped the nightmare. The eye's proximity scanner suddenly blared to life. Unidentified objects detected. Approach velocity, high. Origin, multiple vectors. She bolted upright. Show me. The viewport's holographic overlay displayed an ominous cluster of small, dart-like vessels converging on her position. They moved with terrifying speed, their trajectories calculated with predatory precision. Scavenger drones, she muttered. These machines weren't sentient, but they were lethal, autonomous units designed to tear apart derelict ships for parts. And anything organic on board? They weren't picky. Kira's hands flew over the controls. The pod's thrusters sputtered weakly as she attempted to veer off course, but it was too late. The first drone reached her, latching onto the hull with mechanical claws. A sharp screech echoed through the cabin as the drone began slicing into the exterior. AI, activate external defenses. External defenses offline. Power allocation insufficient. She grabbed her plasma cutter and unstrapped herself. If the pod couldn't fight, she would. She climbed into the narrow airlock, her movements hurried but deliberate. The external hatch opened, revealing the drone clinging to the hull like a grotesque spider. She aimed the cutter and fired. A searing arc of plasma struck the drone, slicing through one of its legs. It screeched and released its grip, spiraling into the void. Kira barely had time to breathe before two more drones descended, their glowing red optics locking onto her. One lunged for her, its claws raking across her suit. She twisted, narrowly avoiding a puncture. The second drone extended a mechanical appendage, firing a cutting laser. The beam sizzled past her, grazing the hull and melting a small section. Kira gritted her teeth and lunged, slamming the plasma cutter into the first drone's central processor. Sparks erupted as the machine convulsed and went limp. She shoved it away, but the second drone was already closing in. The drone's claws lashed out, catching her shoulder. Pain flared, but she used the momentum to swing herself upward, driving her cutter into its optic sensor. The drone flailed, its movements erratic, before it exploded in a shower of shrapnel. Breathing heavily, Kira crawled back into the airlock, slamming the hatch shut. Her suit's diagnostics displayed a warning: minimal oxygen reserves remaining. She staggered into the cockpit and collapsed into the seat. AI, how many drones left? 4 drones inbound. Arrival in 2 minutes. Her mind raced. She couldn't fight them all, not in her state. She needed a plan, something desperate and bold. Her gaze flicked to the navigation console, where a distant, faint signal caught her eye. A derelict station, abandoned and drifting near the cryopod's trajectory. AI, calculate a route to that station. Can we make it? Trajectory feasible. Power reserves will be critically depleted upon arrival. She slammed the throttle forward. Do it. And prepare to dump the reactor core. The AI hesitated. Warning, ejecting the reactor will leave this vessel permanently disabled. I'm aware, she snapped. Just prepare it. The pod lurched as it accelerated, the scavenger drones closing in fast. Kira gripped the controls, her body tense. The derelict station grew larger on the viewport, a hulking silhouette of twisted metal and shattered solar panels. AI, eject the reactor core on my mark. The drones were almost on her, their claws glinting in the starlight. Kira veered sharply, narrowly avoiding a collision with a chunk of debris. The drones followed, their formations tightening like a pack of wolves. Mark! The reactor core ejected from the pod with a violent jolt, its radioactive glow illuminating the void. The drones instantly shifted their attention, drawn to the powerful energy source. Kira watched as they swarmed the core, tearing into it with reckless fervor. She didn't wait to see the explosion. The pod's momentum carried her toward the derelict station, its jagged exterior looming closer. She braced herself as the pod collided with the station's docking platform, the impact sending a tremor through her body. Alarms blared, and the cabin lights flickered. Kira unstrapped herself and grabbed her survival pack, her legs trembling as she stood. She had to move quickly, the pod wouldn't last much longer. The airlock hissed open, and she stepped into the station's dark interior. The smell of decay and ozone hit her immediately. Her flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing corridors choked with debris and shattered glass. AI, scan for oxygen and power sources, she said, her voice tight. Oxygen levels nominal in central hub. Auxiliary power detected but unstable. She moved cautiously, her plasma cutter at the ready. The station creaked ominously, its structure weakened by years of neglect. Her flashlight swept over faded insignias on the walls, remnants of a long-abandoned civilization. She reached the central hub, a cavernous space filled with consoles and monitors. Most were dark, but a few flickered weakly, their screens displaying alien symbols. She approached one and activated her translator device. Log entry, date unknown. Experiment 427 failed. Containment breach imminent. Evacuation protocols initiated. Kira's stomach churned. Whatever had happened here, it hadn't ended well. She turned her attention to the oxygen supply, connecting her suit to the station system. Cool air flowed into her helmet, easing the tightness in her chest. As she worked, a low rumble echoed through the station. Her heart skipped a beat. She spun around, her flashlight beam sweeping the darkness. For a moment, there was only silence, then a guttural growl reverberated from the shadows. Her blood ran cold. She wasn't alone. Kira's flashlight trembled in her grasp as the guttural growl echoed again, reverberating through the decrepit corridors of the station. The sound was low and primal, unlike anything she'd encountered before. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere to go. The oxygen supply line was still connected to her suit, and she couldn't risk severing it prematurely. "AI," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "analyze sound source. What's out there?" Analysis inconclusive. Acoustic signature suggests unknown biological entity. Threat level, high. Her pulse quickened. She scanned the room, her eyes darting between the shadows. The central hub's dim light cast long, jagged shapes across the walls, and every flicker seemed alive. Slowly, she disconnected her suit from the oxygen supply, her movements precise and deliberate. With a deep breath, she detached, grabbing her plasma cutter and survival pack. The growl came again, closer this time. Kira backed toward a partially functioning console, her gaze fixed on the doorway. The sound of claws scraping against metal sent shivers down her spine. Then, from the shadows, it emerged. The creature was massive, its body a twisted amalgamation of sinewy flesh and metallic grafts. Its 4 glowing eyes radiated a sickly green light, and its elongated limbs ended in razor-sharp talons. It moved with a predatory grace, its gaze locked on her. Kira's mind raced. There was no time to think, only to act. The creature lunged. She dove to the side, narrowly avoiding its claws as they tore through the console behind her. Sparks flew, and the room plunged into near darkness. Kira rolled onto her back, raising her plasma cutter. She fired a searing beam, striking the creature's shoulder. It screeched, a deafening, metallic wail, but didn't slow. Scrambling to her feet, Kira bolted down a corridor, her flashlight bouncing wildly. The station's labyrinthine passages twisted and turned, each one filled with debris and shadows. The creature's guttural growls followed her, growing louder with every passing second. She rounded a corner and found herself in a maintenance bay. The room was cluttered with tools, equipment, and what looked like an old hovercart. Her eyes landed on a fuel canister marked with alien symbols. A desperate idea formed in her mind. She grabbed the canister and rigged it with a makeshift detonator using her survival kit. The creature's heavy footsteps echoed closer, its growls filling the bay. Kira placed the canister in the middle of the room and hid behind the hovercart, clutching the detonator with trembling hands. The creature entered, its glowing eyes scanning the room. It sniffed the air, its talons clicking against the floor as it advanced toward the canister. Kira's breath caught in her throat as she waited for the right moment. The creature crouched over the canister, its claws probing curiously. "Now," she whispered, pressing the detonator. The explosion rocked the bay, a fiery blast that engulfed the creature. Kira shielded her face as debris rained down around her. When the smoke cleared, the creature lay motionless, its body charred and broken. She didn't wait to see if it would get back up. Grabbing the hovercart, she loaded it with a spare oxygen tank and any supplies she could find. She needed to get to the station's power core and secure a way to communicate with the cryopod before more horrors appeared. Navigating the station's crumbling corridors, she reached the core, a vast chamber filled with humming machinery and glowing conduits. The core's faint energy was the station's lifeblood, and it pulsed with an eerie, rhythmic glow. "AI, establish a link with the cryopod. Can we use this core to boost a transmission? Link feasible. Power transfer required. Warning, power draw may destabilize core integrity." Kira frowned. The last thing she needed was for the station to collapse on her. Still, it was her only option. She connected her suit's interface to the core and initiated the transfer. The machinery groaned, its ancient circuits sparking under the strain. The AI's voice broke through the static. "Cryopod link established. Message transmission ready." Kira spoke quickly, her voice firm. "To whoever intercepts this, I'm Kira Langley, last living human. The cryopod contains the genetic legacy of humanity. Protect it at all costs. I'm aboard a derelict station in critical condition. Assistance urgently needed. Coordinates attached." The core shuddered violently as the transmission ended. Warning lights flashed across the chamber, and a deep rumble resonated through the station. Core stability failing. Structural collapse imminent, the AI warned. Kira cursed under her breath. She grabbed her supplies and sprinted toward the docking platform. She had to find a way off the station before it tore itself apart. The corridors buckled and twisted as explosions rocked the station. Panels burst from the walls, and chunks of debris rained down. Kira ducked and weaved, her every step a battle against the crumbling structure. Finally, she reached the docking platform, her eyes landing on a small, dilapidated shuttle. It looked barely functional, but it was her only chance. She climbed inside, her hands flying over the unfamiliar controls. The engines sputtered to life, coughing and groaning like a dying animal. The station's core detonated as she launched, a blinding burst of light and fire consuming the structure. Her shuttle spiraled out of control, buffeted by the shockwave. Kira gripped the controls, her teeth clenched as she fought to stabilize the craft. When the turbulence subsided, she looked out the viewport. The derelict station was gone, reduced to a field of glowing debris. Her shuttle drifted aimlessly, its systems barely operational. Kira leaned back, exhaustion washing over her. She had survived again, but for how much longer? She was still alone, still adrift in the void. And somewhere out there, more threats were surely waiting. Her gaze shifted to the faint dot of the cryopod in the distance. It was still on course, still carrying the last hope of humanity. Kira swore to herself that she wouldn't stop fighting, not until the pod reached safety. The shuttle's interior was a dim and flickering haze, the atmosphere heavy with the acrid stench of burnt wiring. Kira sat slumped in the pilot's seat, her body aching from the strain of constant survival. The glow of the cryopod was a distant beacon on the console's trajectory display, but it felt impossibly far. Her fingers danced over the controls, coaxing life into the failing systems. A warning alarm blared, fuel reserves critically low. The eye's monotone voice pierced the stillness. Shuttle systems compromised. Estimated operational time, 3 hours at current velocity. She gritted her teeth. 3 hours isn't enough. Suggestions. Nearest habitable structure, derelict vessel designated salvation. Probability of compatible resources, 76%. Coordinates. A holographic map flickered into view, highlighting a massive ship adrift in a dense asteroid field. The Salvation loomed on the edge of her shuttle's range. Its name was etched in history. Once a flagship of Earth's colonization fleet, it was lost centuries ago. Kira felt a pang of unease. She had no choice. Course set. Let's hope Salvation lives up to its name. The asteroid field was a graveyard of frozen rock and jagged debris, each shadow concealing unknown dangers. Kira maneuvered the shuttle carefully, every turn a dance with death. Salvation emerged from the darkness, a monolithic structure encased in layers of ice and forgotten time. Docking was harrowing. The shuttle's stabilizers protested every adjustment, and the bay's entrance was barely wide enough to accommodate her craft. Sparks flew as the shuttle scraped its way inside, skidding to a halt in the ancient hangar. Kira wasted no time. She grabbed her survival pack and plasma cutter, stepping into the icy void of the derelict ship. The Salvation's interior was a cathedral of desolation. Vast corridors stretched into darkness, their walls covered in frost and corroded panels. Kira's breath formed clouds in the frigid air as her flashlight carved a path through the gloom. AI, scan for power sources and navigation systems, she said, her voice echoing eerily. Power detected in auxiliary systems. Functionality minimal. Ship logs and maps may be accessible from Central Command. She moved with purpose, the eerie silence broken only by the creak of strained metal. Shadows seemed to move in the edges of her vision, but every time she turned, there was nothing. It was as if the ship itself was watching her. The Central Command room was vast, its walls lined with dormant consoles. One console flickered faintly, its ancient interface barely operational. Kira approached, connecting her translator device. The screen sputtered to life, displaying a fragmented log. Salvation Log Entry 381. Crew, deceased. Cause, invasive bioforms. Vessel, quarantined. Automated defense systems, engaged. Warning, unauthorized presence detected. The console abruptly powered down as a mechanical whir echoed behind her. Kira spun, her plasma cutter raised. A humanoid figure stood in the doorway, its silhouette backlit by the dim emergency lights. It stepped forward, a maintenance droid, its once human design corrupted by alien modifications. The droid lunged, its movements unnervingly fast. Kira ducked as its mechanical claws slashed through the air. She countered with her plasma cutter, the beam slicing through one of its arms. Sparks erupted, but the droid didn't falter. She bolted, weaving through the labyrinthine corridors. The droid pursued relentlessly, its metallic footsteps echoing like a drumbeat. She stumbled into what looked like an armory, her flashlight illuminating racks of disassembled weapons and tools. She grabbed an energy rifle, its design alien but intuitive, and turned just as the droid burst through the doorway. The first shot hit its chest, a burst of blue energy sending it staggering back. The second shot severed its head. The droid collapsed, its body twitching before going still. Kira leaned against the wall, her breathing ragged. Her moment of relief was short-lived. The eye's voice chimed urgently. Multiple bioform signatures detected. Approach velocity, rapid. Her stomach sank. The ship's quarantine hadn't been idle. Whatever had wiped out the Salvation's crew was still here, and it had noticed her presence. The bioforms arrived as a tidal wave of grotesque, chittering horrors. Their shapes defied logic, twisted amalgamations of flesh, metal, and something unearthly. Kira fought her way through the ship, her rifle blazing. Each step was a struggle against the onslaught, her mind teetering on the edge of panic. "AI," she gasped, firing another shot, "route me to the engines. I'm not leaving this place intact." Route calculated. Warning, engine detonation will result in complete vessel destruction. That's the idea. The path to the engine room was a gauntlet of terror. The bioforms swarmed, their claws and teeth tearing through metal and flesh alike. Kira's ammunition dwindled, her body battered and bruised. But she pressed on, driven by a singular purpose. The engine room was a towering chamber of glowing reactors and intricate machinery. She activated the console, setting the reactors to overload. The countdown began, its rhythmic beeping a death knell. The bioforms descended, their shrieks deafening. Kira fought with everything she had, her plasma cutter and rifle her only allies. As the timer ticked down, she sprinted toward the hangar, the Salvation shaking violently as the engines neared critical mass. Her shuttle was barely functional, but it roared to life under her desperate hands. The hangar bay doors groaned open, and she launched into the void as the Salvation erupted in a blinding explosion. The shockwave hurled her craft into the asteroid field, spinning uncontrollably. When the chaos subsided, Kira opened her eyes to the dim light of her cockpit. The shuttle's systems were barely holding, alarms blaring incessantly. She silenced them, her gaze shifting to the trajectory display. The cryopod was still there, still moving toward its destination. She exhaled, a shaky but determined breath. She was battered, alone, and adrift in an unforgiving void. But she had survived. She always survived. Her hand brushed against the console, and she stared at the cryopod's faint glow. It wasn't just the legacy of humanity, it was her purpose. Her reason to fight. And as long as she drew breath, she would protect it. Whatever came next, she was ready.